He was supposed to uphold the law. Instead, he shattered it in the most unthinkable way. Brian McManus, a former London police officer, trusted, decorated, respected, now a convicted murderer in the American South, a killer hiding in plain sight, a badge once pinned to a man, now defined by what he destroyed. The headlines screamed it. Ex-UK cop found guilty of cold-blooded murder in Georgia. But beneath the ink and verdicts lay a life brutally taken, and a truth too dark for most to face. Her name was Anna Harmon, 28 years old, a nurse, a daughter, a woman who lit up every dark hallway she walked through. She had grown up in Savannah, Georgia, near the river's edge where Spanish moss drips from the trees, and secrets sink deep into the soil. Anna was the kind of woman who stayed late after shifts to sit with patients whose families never came. She volunteered with trauma survivors on weekends. She believed fiercely that no one should ever feel helpless. She had soft brown eyes and a laugh that seemed to push winter away. But she also carried the weight of others' pain and tried, always, to make herself the place where it could stop. Her mother called her sunlight in a world of shadows. Her co-workers said she gave too much. No one expected that she would become the very thing she tried to protect others from. When she first met Brian McManus, he was charming, polite, witty in a way that felt almost Britishly disarming. He was 29 years older, but his calm voice and quiet smile made him seem safe. He told her he had been a cop in London, that he had worked homicide, that he had seen darkness and turned away from it. He never said why he had left. He said America was a fresh start, said Georgia felt like peace at last, said she made him believe in goodness again. But something inside Anna tightened the night he first called her my possession. She laughed it off. He smiled too much, and then stopped laughing altogether. The apartment on Riverstone Avenue was small. 2 rooms, 1 window, a balcony that looked out onto flickering streetlights and closed blinds. Neighbors heard muffled arguments. One said Anna's voice cracked like someone trying not to cry. Another swore they heard something shatter at 3 a.m., but no one knocked. No one intervened. Brian wore pressed shirts and nodded politely in the elevator. He helped a neighbor change a tire. He picked up his mail with military precision. He was invisible in the most dangerous way. On the morning of July 2nd, Anna did not show up for work. She had not missed a shift in 3 years. A co-worker called. Then another. Her phone rang, then went dead. By dusk, her mother was banging on the door of the apartment. No answer. No light. Inside, behind a locked door, Anna lay face down on the cold tile bathroom floor. The coroner later said there were signs of blunt force trauma, but no weapon was ever found. Brian told police he had gone out that night, said Anna was sleeping when he left, said he came home to find her already gone. His voice never cracked. His hands never shook. But the security camera from across the street told a story his mouth never would. At 3:14 a.m., a tall man, shirtless, with blood on his left arm, walked onto the balcony, stared into the dark, then lit a cigarette. The timestamp froze the lie and cracked the first thread. Investigators dug into his past. What they found buried in London sent shivers across 2 continents. Internal complaints, allegations of excessive force, a sealed file with redacted names, and one phrase scrawled in faded pen. Psychological risk ignored. A woman in Camden had filed a complaint in 2006. Said Brian had stalked her after a traffic stop. Nothing came of it. Her name was nowhere in official records. She died by suicide a year later. Another file, marked unfounded, accused him of coercing a witness into silence. That witness disappeared. He had left the force in 2010. No ceremony, no farewell, just gone, and then appeared in Georgia with a new identity, a new accent thickened with southern ease, and a past wiped clean. Anna had once told her best friend, "He watches me sleep, not in a romantic way, in a way that feels like a warning." She had said it with a half smile, like she did not want it to be real, But something inside her had begun to fracture. She stopped wearing bright colors, started canceling shifts. One nurse remembered her hands shaking as she wrapped gauze. Another said she forgot how to smile. And then there were the bruises, neatly explained away, never too visible, never too many, until her body could no longer contain the truth. In court, Brian sat with folded hands, unblinking, unmoved. He did not cry when the jury read guilty. He did not look up when Anna's mother sobbed from the front row. He only whispered. They never saw the whole story. But the story was written, in broken ribs, in silence echoing down a stairwell, in the final voicemail Anna never sent. It was drafted in fear, signed in blood, and sealed by a man who wore a badge, then used it to become the very thing he swore to fight. The cell is cold now. Georgia's sun does not touch the floor, and Brian McManus sits in a jumpsuit where the only thing he is allowed to control is when he chooses to remember her. But in Savannah, a candle still burns at Anna's favorite park bench. A plaque beneath it reads, "She gave light. He took it." And on quiet nights, when the wind moves through moss, people swear they hear a woman's voice, soft breaking, whispering a name no one should have ever trusted. At first, the news barely stirred. A man killed a woman in Savannah. Another domestic incident. Another name buried beneath louder headlines. But then the truth clawed its way into daylight. He had been a cop, not just any cop, a homicide detective. He once lectured about spotting sociopaths. Now, he had become the textbook example. The media swarmed. BBC, CNN, Sky News. Everyone wanted to know, how did this man slip through two justice systems? In London, journalists dug into sealed records. What they found horrified even the hardened. A redacted 1998 report. A female informant found dead 2 days after naming McManus in an internal corruption probe. Her death ruled accidental, a fall from a balcony. The same way Anna Harmon had once described a nightmare. I keep dreaming I'm falling. But when I look up, he's the one who let go. Back in Georgia, the trial became a storm. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Protesters gathered with signs. Justice for Anna. No badge above the law. Inside, the prosecutor told a story of calculated control, of a man who knew exactly how much pressure to apply, before it left no marks. They showed photos of Anna's arms, bruises the size of fingerprints, one healed into the shape of a ring. They played her final 911 call, a call that never connected. But in the background, a door slamming, a voice, her voice, breathless, terrified, and then silence. Brian's defense called it a tragic accident. Said Anna had fallen in the shower. Said he tried to revive her. But the autopsy told a different tale. Broken ribs from downward force, bruising behind the ears, signs of blunt trauma. No water in the lungs. No slip, no accident. Just violence. Pure, deliberate, targeted. In the courtroom, Anna's mother wore her daughter's necklace. It had been found in a drawer, its clasp broken. She testified about the day Anna stopped coming home for Sunday lunch, how she smiled less, how she wore longer sleeves in the summer, how she once said, "Mom, if something ever happens to me, promise me you won't let him get away with it." She promised. And now she sat just feet from a man who had stolen her child. She did not blink, did not cry, until the verdict. Guilty. The word crashed like thunder. Brian did not move. He blinked once, twice, then turned to stare directly at Anna's mother. No remorse, just defiance, a stare that said, "I still control something." But outside, crowds erupted. People wept. Strangers hugged. Someone placed a daisy on the courthouse steps, Anna's favorite flower. Yet the victory felt hollow, because justice could not bring her back. It could not restore her voice, or unwrite the nights she spent in fear. It could not erase what it meant, that a man sworn to protect had hunted someone who trusted him, and it raised deeper questions. How many others like him were out there? How many were still hiding behind the silence? In prison, Brian McManus became inmate number 448197. No title, no uniform, no badge, just another man behind bars. But guards noted something strange. He never spoke to anyone, never accepted visitors, never asked for books, just sat day after day, staring at the wall. One officer said he muttered names in his sleep, women's names, some known, some not. Isabella, Clarice, Anna. I told him not to speak. Inside cell block D, inmates whispered about him, called him the quiet cop, said his eyes looked through people. One inmate said he smiled after someone was stabbed in the yard, not because of the blood, but because he did not have to lift a finger. That kind of control, it stays, even behind bars. But outside, Anna's legacy began to rise. Her co-workers started the Anna Lee Foundation, a support group for nurses in abusive relationships. Her story was taught in police ethics classes, and her childhood home in Savannah turned into a shelter, named Anna's Light, where women enter with nothing, but leave with a future. Still, there are moments when Savannah feels haunted, when the wind carries her voice, when a shadow on Riverstone Avenue lingers too long. Because Anna's story is not just hers. It is every woman who trusted too much, every neighbor who heard a scream and turned up the TV, every system that protected a predator, because he wore a badge. The last thing Anna ever wrote was found in her journal, a single page half finished. It read, "I know what he is now, but I do not know how to leave. If I disappear, please believe I did not want to." The page ends there. No signature, no date, just the raw, unfinished truth of a woman who tried to survive a man, trained to break people silently. Brian McManus remains in solitary confinement. No parole, no appeals, just four walls, and the weight of the one voice he cannot silence forever, because now the whole world knows her name, and somewhere in the darkest corners of justice, a warning echoes. Even those who wear the badge can become the monsters we fear the most. The verdict was not the end. It was a crack in the wall. And through that crack, years of silence came rushing out. Women across 2 countries began sharing stories. Some came forward with trembling hands, others with fists clenched in rage. They all had one thing in common. They had known Brian McManus, a retired bartender in Brixton, a domestic violence counselor in Birmingham, a former university student in Liverpool. All different, all disconnected. Until now, they spoke of glances that lingered too long, messages that turned threatening, moments that felt harmless until they were not. One woman recalled how he followed her home after she reported a break-in. She never called the police again. Another described an off-duty officer who showed up at her workplace, then told her, "No one will believe you. I am the evidence." No charges were ever filed. Every report was buried. Every red flag ignored. Because Brian was one of them. And bad cops protect each other. In the same way wolves circle the wounded. Back in Georgia, the governor ordered a review of how McManus was granted residency. How a man with sealed misconduct records had crossed borders and reinvented himself as a citizen. The answer? A forged background check, a friend in immigration, and no one asking questions, not even when he applied for a firearms license, not even when he started teaching self-defense classes to women at a local gym. Anna was one of them. That is how they met. She had walked into that room to feel safer and walked out with the devil's shadow already following her. The city of Savannah faced pressure. Marches filled the streets. Candles lined courthouse steps. A mural of Anna appeared overnight on the side of her old hospital, her face painted in soft pastels, her eyes staring straight ahead, unblinking, unafraid. Beneath her image were just 3 words: believe her silence. In the months that followed, the Anna Harmon law passed in Georgia, a measure requiring full psychological evaluations for former law enforcement officers applying for state licenses, jobs, or permits. It also created a registry, a silent ledger of dismissed officers, with sealed complaints, unresolved charges, and histories buried beneath paperwork. No longer would predators wear uniforms and walk into new towns with clean slates and bad intentions. Brian McManus never spoke to the press, but one prison therapist kept notes. He described McManus as highly intelligent, emotionally manipulative, and utterly convinced of his innocence. When asked about Anna, he reportedly smirked, said she knew how to push buttons. She wanted a reaction. When asked about the other women, he replied, "They are all liars. I was respected, decorated. I had control." And that was the word that returned, again and again, control. Even now, in a concrete cell with no keys, he believed he still had it. But the world outside had changed. People were no longer whispering. They were shouting. At community centers, women sat in circles, telling stories that sounded eerily similar. Hands shook, eyes filled. Some cried not from sadness, but from relief, because someone had finally named the fear they had been carrying alone. In London, an inquiry was reopened. Scotland Yard admitted that Brian McManus had slipped through their system. But slipped is a soft word. The truth was sharper. They protected him because he was one of them, and because the ones who reported him were women, women without power, without proof, without the luxury of being believed. One of them, Clarissa Vane, now in her 50s, stood on the steps of Parliament and held up a yellowing report. It was her original complaint from 2005, stamped closed, unsubstantiated. She looked into the cameras and said, if they had listened then, Anna would be alive today. No one looked away. No one interrupted, because there was nothing left to say, except we failed her. Anna's story became a symbol, not of death, but of the consequences of not listening. College courses began using her case as a cautionary tale in criminal justice. Her mother, Susan Harmon, spoke at conferences, but never as a victim. She spoke as a mother, a woman who lost her child, to a man the system refused to see for what he was. She ended every speech the same way. You do not need bruises to be in danger. You do not need screams to hear violence. You just need to pay attention before it is too late. And yet, in the deepest parts of Savannah, in the quiet where no headlines reach, there is still a hollow space. The apartment on Riverstone Avenue remains empty. Neighbors say no one stays long. Some say they hear footsteps at night. Others say the lights flicker on the anniversary of her death. A few believe it is Anna, a spirit searching for justice she never got in life, but others believe it is him, that somehow evil leaves residue, and that long after the bars are locked and the cells are silent, the memory of what he did still pulses through the floorboards. Because this story is not just about one man. It is about how many were silent, how many were complicit, how many chose comfort over truth, and how one woman, with gentle eyes and too much trust, paid the price for all of it. A former London detective, once sworn to protect, used every skill he had to become the perfect predator. He did not need a weapon. He was one. He did not need to stalk his victims. They walked right into his life, believing the badge meant safety. But he was never protecting them. He was watching, waiting, controlling. And when Anna finally tried to leave, he did what men like him always do. He made sure no one else could have her. Somewhere in a locked prison cell, Brian McManus still breathes. But outside those walls, her voice grows louder. It speaks through laws, through survivors, through mothers who now know the warning signs, through every woman who walks away from someone who says, you belong to me. And in that way, she wins, not because justice was perfect, not because the system fixed itself, but because Anna Harmon refused to be forgotten, and her story, painful as it is, will be the one that saves others. 10 years have passed, but for those who knew her, time has not dulled the loss. Anna Harmon is not just a face in a mural anymore. She is a chapter in training manuals, a foundation in her name, a force that still moves through courtrooms, classrooms, and state capitals. And yet, for her mother, for the women who came forward, for those who carried her story in their bones, the pain never left. It only changed shape. Every July 2nd, a vigil is held beneath the oak tree at Forsyth Park, the same place Anna once walked barefoot in the grass, laughing under the street lamps. Each year, more people show up. Some never met her. Some owe their survival to her story. The candles flicker as names are read, not just Anna's, but the names of other women, taken by men who claim to love them. And when the wind picks up, the flames lean in the same direction, as if the universe itself is listening. Anna's former co-workers, nurses, now older, wiser, speak to younger women entering the field. They no longer ignore the signs. They ask harder questions. They advocate fiercely. The hospital now runs mandatory trauma training on intimate partner violence. It is called the Anna Protocol. It teaches staff to recognize not just bruises, but fear, silence, shifting eyes, excuses that do not make sense. Because sometimes saving a life starts with seeing what others choose not to. In the UK, reforms came slower, but they came. The McManus inquiry exposed decades of misconduct, buried beneath bureaucracy, hundreds of complaints, many dismissed, some labeled malicious without investigation. One commissioner resigned. 2 internal affairs officers were indicted for destruction of evidence. And for the first time, London's Metropolitan Police created an independent civilian board to review claims of abuse against officers. Its name? Project Harmon. Survivors around the world began writing in, sending letters, emails, telling their own stories. Some have escaped, some still unfolding. One letter read, "I was with a man like him for 4 years. I never had proof, only fear. Your daughter gave me the strength to leave, because if I waited any longer, I might not have made it out." The letters now fill 3 filing cabinets in Susan Harmon's home. She reads them aloud each night. 1 page, 1 voice. She says it is how she keeps her daughter alive, back in Georgia State Prison. Brian McManus remains in solitary confinement. The guards call him the Watcher, not because he stares at them, but because he never looks away, even when lights go out, even when the screams of other inmates echo through the concrete. He just sits, eyes wide, mouth closed. He has refused interviews, refused therapy, refused to testify in any of the reopened cases tied to his name. He has said only one thing. To the last prison warden who asked him why he did it, "She made me feel powerless." 6 words, 6 bullets of truth. Because for men like Brian, power was everything. And when it slipped through his fingers, he chose to destroy the source. Instead of letting her go, one journalist tried to write a book about him, spent months petitioning for access, gathered files from the UK, dug through court records, interviewed neighbors, colleagues, victims, but she stopped writing halfway through. When asked why, she said, "I was afraid that giving him a voice would mean silencing hers." So instead, she wrote a book about Anna, about what it means to be believed too late, about the machinery of power and silence, about the cracks in the system that women fall through every day. It became a national bestseller, required reading in 4 states. But not everything is healed. There are still officers who think McManus was a one-off, still departments that shield their own, still judges who ask women why they stayed, and still voices that whisper, "It will not happen to me," until it does. Anna's best friend, Lacey, now runs a crisis hotline. One night, a call came in, a trembling teenage girl, whispering into the dark, scared, unsure. She said she had read about Anna online, said something about her story felt too familiar, said she needed someone to believe her. Lacey stayed on the line for 2 hours, and when the girl was safe, Lacey sat in silence for a long time. Then she whispered You saved another one, Anna. That is the real legacy. Not a headline, not a courtroom, not a verdict, but the quiet moments where women feel less alone because one voice refused to stay buried. Sometimes, late at night, Susan Harmon walks to her daughter's old room. Nothing has changed. The books, the necklace on the dresser, the worn-out sneakers near the closet. She stands at the doorway and says softly, "You still matter. You still change the world." And across oceans, in dark cells, and dusty files, the name Anna Lee Harmon still echoes, still pushes back, still demands we do better. Because justice was not the end. It was the beginning of a world that finally understands what happens when we let monsters wear uniforms, when we ignore the silence of the afraid, and when we choose not to believe until blood has already been spilled. She was 28. She loved sunflowers and chocolate ice cream. She believed in people, even when she should not have, and she died not because of one man's hands, but because too many stood still when they should have spoken. Her story is not finished. It is still unfolding. In every woman who survives, in every system that reforms, in every name remembered instead of erased. And now, you know her. You cannot unknow her. And that is the beginning of your responsibility. In classrooms where Anna's name is spoken, students no longer ask, "What did she do wrong?" They ask, "Why did no one stop him?" The conversation is changing because it has to, because silence is no longer safety, and wearing a uniform is no longer a shield. Every time a woman files a report, someone reads it now, not always perfectly, but more eyes are open. Every time a survivor stands in court, she stands with the weight of Anna behind her. Her name has become a shield, a warning, a prayer, and to the ones who think they can still get away with it, that no one will believe her, that no one will ask questions, that no one will fight back. They now know one thing. Anna made sure someone would. At the annual International Criminal Justice Summit, a new award was introduced. It is not named after a lawyer, or a judge, or a police commissioner. It is named the Harmon Honor, awarded to frontline workers who challenge abuse of power, who will believe women the first time, who refuse to stay silent, even when it costs them everything. One year, it was given posthumously to a young officer in New York who reported his own captain for misconduct. He was fired, ostracized, but his testimony saved a woman's life. He accepted the award with tears in his eyes, saying only, "Anna taught me that a badge is a responsibility, not a weapon." There are still people who flinch at her name, still officers who look away, still departments with back doors and buried files. But every file now carries the weight of scrutiny. Every silence is a little louder, because Anna turned her pain into a floodlight. And once you have seen what lies beneath, you cannot pretend the ground is solid anymore. Back in Savannah, her mural has aged. The colors are slightly faded, but the eyes still hold the same fire. Tourists walk by and pause. Some take photos. Others just look. A small sign now stands beneath it. This is not art. This is a promise. Brian McManus is 67 now. Old, invisible, irrelevant. He receives no visitors, no letters, no press requests anymore. His name has become a warning, not a legacy. Even the guards no longer flinch at his stare, because power has drained from his bones, because the world outside has finally seen through the act, and in that way, he has been erased, not by force, not by vengeance, but by truth, the slow, unrelenting kind, that carves names into stone and shame into history. Every July, Susan Harmon still walks alone to the bench in Forsyth Park. She sits under the oak tree. She places a sunflower at its base, and then she reads one letter from a stack of thousands. Some are tear-stained, some written in shaky cursive. All carry the same echo. Because of Anna, I left, I lived, I believed myself. This is not just a murder story. This is a revolution. Quiet, fierce, unstoppable. And it began with a girl who smiled too easily, who trusted too deeply, who died too young, but whose voice will never, ever be silenced again. You have heard the story. You carry it now. What you do next is part of it. She never got to say goodbye. No final call. No farewell message. No time to run. But in the silence she left behind, Anna Lee Harmon's voice became louder than ever was in life. She became a mirror, a warning, a symbol of everything the system tried to hide and everything it could no longer ignore. We tell true crime stories to remember the victims, but also to reckon with the world that created their killers, to look inward and ask how many more names we will need to read before we change anything at all. Anna's case was not about a monster in the dark. It was about a man in plain sight, wearing a badge, earning trust, and using both to destroy a life he could not control. The courtroom closed. The headlines faded. Brian McManus sits in silence now, gray-haired, alone. But justice is not found in a locked cell. It is found in the women who walk away, in the policies rewritten, in the eyes of nurses who see what others once missed. It is found in the candlelight that still burned for Anna 10 Julys later. Closure is a word people love to use. But there is no closure for a mother who buries her child. There is no closure in a life cut short. There is only the choice to carry the truth or to look away. Susan Harmon chose to carry it. The survivors chose to carry it. And now, so, do you? Anna's story will not bring her back, but it might stop the next woman from becoming a story. That is what justice looks like in real life. Messy, painful, endless, but still worth chasing. Because even in death, Anna saved lives. And maybe that is a final, haunting truth. She died believing she was powerless, but she left behind a force no man, no system could ever silence. For Anna, for all of them, we remember, we listen, we change,